Hey everyone, it's DrRic. So today's topic is a tutorial on Vata balancing. I've been wanting to do this tutorial for a while. It's just hard for me to organize my thoughts because there's so much to talk about in a short time of a tutorial. Maybe that's because I'm Vata imbalanced. And Vata, the word Vata comes from Ayurveda. Ayurveda is an ancient healing tradition from India. And in Ayurveda, which is still in practice today, in addition to Western medicine techniques, in Ayurveda we kind of use old school theories, old school teachings to fix suffering, to reverse disease, truthfully, and it still works. Just like my acupuncture guy back here, acupuncture still works. I just choose not to do the acupuncture now because I just don't have any time. But when I was throwing needles, I would get people to feel better even before they would have to go to physical therapy. And I think that's great. So the beauty of integrative medicine is we can go between prescription medicines or old school techniques, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda. But for the sake of Vata balancing, we'll just talk about that. So Vata is a dosha. Doshas are mind-body types in Ayurveda. And it's kind of cool because there are three. There are three types. There's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And for this lecture or tutorial, we'll talk about Vatas. I try not to talk about the imbalances and not to get to too many of the esoteric terms, but if we're trying to get to balance, then we'll just go through it now as we sometimes will manifest with imbalance. When a Vata is right on, they're creative, they're artistic, they can problem solve, multitask, usually CEOs, presidents of the United States, moms, but artists, and life is good when in balance. When out of balance, and some of you might kind of resonate with this, when out of balance you'll see all the symptoms of the world come up. So the first big manifestation is anxiety. Anxiety, ADD, memory, difficulty with making decisions, that all can be Vata imbalance. So I have a picture of a brain. It's supposed to be a brain, but it says these are arrows pointing away from the brain. Anyway, that's one of the manifestations. And if the brain is off balance, or anxious, or irritable, awake at night, difficult to sleep, then usually that offsets the colon. As you know, in Western terms, the colon, in Western medicine, the colon and the digestive system will be off when you're emotionally distraught. You'll have upset stomach, you'll have diarrhea, nervous stomach. That term, the nervous stomach, or gut feeling, will be because of how the mind and the body work together. Now, only in the United States do we separate spirit, mind, and body and just say it's just body, that's it. You fix the body, things are cool. But I don't agree with that. I think you have to really link everything together. Somebody just treating a body or prescriptions and not addressing the root cause will probably get temporary response, but will usually have the disease manifest later on anyway, and worse. So when out of control, sometimes we'll see the gut start to flare up. Gas, bloating, indigestion, constipation. All those could be from Vata. Vata, the house of Vata is usually in the large intestine. When the large intestine when you feel bloating, gas, like I mentioned, constipation, you'll usually have a Vata imbalance. Those things I'm going to talk about in a second will get to balancing Vata. And again, foods will really affect the gut. Foods will also affect the brain and the mood. You wouldn't think that. In fact, the first thing with anxiety or ADD is not to think about food, it's to think about prescription medicines, which is the wrong thing. But how many times those of you who take medicines like Xanax or any benzodiazepine to calm the brain down, Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac, clonazepam, how many times has your psychiatrist told you, or your primary care doctor that's giving this, told you to also take away caffeine, stop alcohol, decrease those foods that cause airiness or bloating? They probably haven't, and it makes a big difference. So if we go back to the symptoms of bloat, gas, constipation, and we work on foods that reverse that, you will be balancing Vata. And it's as easy as that. Now, sometimes we'll use certain medicines We use medicines for IBS or problems with absorption like Linzess that will reverse some of the consistency of the stool, or Miralax. But truthfully, it really comes down to changing your food and controlling your mind. So if the diseases worsen and you don't do anything with the bowels, usually what will happen is in Ayurveda, the Vata imbalance transfers on to the bloodstream. The cells, the amount of blood, the way that the blood is getting to the end organs. So usually you'll have manifestations of deficiency in iron, deficiency in B12, anemia. Sometimes you'll even have problems with menstruation, low blood pressure, because of the fact that that dry quality that's typically Vata imbalanced will also start affecting the bloodstream or the blood components. And then what usually happens is, because of the blood and the serum being in direct contact with the skin, you'll have dry skin. You'll have issues with hair loss, dry skin, rashes, dry mouth. Hair loss especially, you wouldn't think of that as being related to anxiety. Well, some of you might. When you're anxious, you pull your hair out. Well, that's usually because of the transfer of that persistent imbalance. When we get to old school treatments, it usually involves food, it involves activities, it involves mindful practice, it involves people that are surrounding you, people that you work with. So you have to always change that. If you change that before this comes severe, you might be able to reverse this and start to get to the point of balance again. So going on, when Vata continues to be imbalanced and we ignore the gut and then the anemia and the problems with dry skin, then it starts to affect some organ systems like the heart. If the heart is excessively dry, given those energy systems that are now progressing on, you'll have palpitations, you'll have fast heart rate, tachycardia. You might even have that cold and clammy feeling, because that's one of the characteristics of Vata is cold, clammy, dry, subtle. Those things in Ayurveda that correspond to space and air. Now, I don't want to get too into details of how the definition of Vata is to be explained, but maybe if you just understand the pathophysiology of the way it presents, then you can understand what the value of the treatment plan. So if you want to go into details, I'll have links on my Herbal 411 YouTube website to people that I like to listen to. Check them out. So sometimes if the heart progresses on, palpitations, tachycardia, cold and clammy hands, weakness, then it'll actually get and lead into the bone, first the muscle and then the bone. Muscle, when you have that dry quality, extend to it, that light quality, the moving quality will start to manifest as spasms, tremor, sometimes muscle cramps. And then when that extends into the joints, you'll have arthritis, you'll have joint pain, osteoporosis, weakness to those joints and the muscles because you can't control that anymore. Sometimes arthritis starts to develop. Whether it's osteoporosis, osteopenia, it doesn't matter. You just have that quality of dryness now affecting muscle and bone. Finally, when it hits that, the next system is usually exhaustion, sleeping difficulties, light sleeper, anxiety, restlessness, indecisiveness, which leads you back to the brain. And then that whole cycle starts up again. So in a nutshell, that is the quality, that's the characteristics of what you are to expect when you are Vata imbalanced. So, having gone through all that, and there are some websites like the Chopra Center has this dosha test or dosha quiz. If you answer the questions, you can see what you're going to be more predominant, Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. But sometimes you might be able to change your food, change your activities, change your mindful practice to match that and balance again. So these are the typical things that we do that are old school to fix things before getting to expensive medicines. So usually you can worry about, or you can try to introduce a contemplative or mindful practice. And I know most people don't like mindfulness because, especially if you're Vata and you're listening to this, it's most difficult to settle down because in your heyday or when you're balanced, you can problem solve like that. CEOs can do multitask, no question. But when you're off balance and you express yourself in this way, and the imbalance or the alma continues to go the wrong way, it'll be very difficult to make decisions because you're constantly bouncing between one idea and another idea. So a lot of unfinished projects. So contemplative, mindful activity usually settles that down. So even if you can't sit there and do a 30-minute mindful practice or meditate, sometimes nature therapy, which I have a lot of videos on nature therapy, walking, sometimes just doing mindful practice in the form of guided imagery with a psychologist who can teach you something will help you get to that point. If you can't do 30 minutes, just do 5. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night will release serotonin. It'll help you get grounded. It'll help fight or balance the rest of the day that's off balance. But that has to be a practice, just like exercise. And a lot of my folks will exercise like run or get on a treadmill, hit the bag. They'll do a lot of activity to distract. And I think you do feel good with any kind of that activity, but the problem is that just distracted you. But after the activity is done and the feeling good part of that activity is finished, then you wind up even deeper into imbalance because you just drained yourself. You can't keep on draining the energy out of this cycle, so you have to be careful. That's why the activities that I choose to suggest to my Vata imbalance patients would be more slowing, more contemplative, like nature therapy, walking, swimming, Tai Chi, yoga. Those might not be too appealing, but try it instead for a short amount of time, and I guarantee you start to feel better, versus just going out and doing a run or hitting the heavy bag, or going and trying high-intensity interval training. So that would be one thing. Avoid the aggressive stuff, slow down. The other thing is truly the food. Oh, by the way, with regards to the activities, I have a couple of yoga practitioners. Aisha, one of the nobles who I am Facebook friends with, just put out a very nice series of poses to do in Ayurveda or yoga that might be good for beginners. If you don't know about yoga, I'll see if I can put a link here for her. Check out her short blog, and it might give you an introduction. Or seek out a yoga teacher, yoga practitioner, Ayurvedic practitioner to design something for you. I also have a very good psychologist who also happens to teach yoga, and you can get 2 for 1 with her, Dr. Nicole Parmalee. So going on, food choices are very important. And then again, we talked about this already, but food choices, Vatas can actually take advantage of meat. I don't suggest red meat too much just because there's a lot of things, antibiotics, chemicals, and other things in meat. So I really suggest, if you can get it, non-farmed fish, free-range chicken, poultry, beans if you can, but certain beans are a little bit tough on Vatas, so you have to be careful of the beans. Any beans essentially that you don't have to soak for a long amount of time are usually kind of easy on a Vata bowel, colon. But if you don't know about that, then you probably should have just avoid the beans. So of the 3 doshas, the Vata can usually have the meat products. Believe it or not, Vatas can also digest milk properly, but pasteurized milk and what you get from an antibiotic, a hit cow, I would have my reservations on that, but they are the doshas that can tolerate those things. Nuts are great. Nut butters are fantastic because they're oily. Oily things are really fantastic. So if you're going to take anything in the vegetable family, which usually is okay, but you shouldn't take anything raw because, again, that's rough stuff that's drying to the gut. If you're going to do veggies, try to do room temperature veggies, not so cold on the veggies because, again, it's just cold will precipitate this. Try to do veggies in oil. If you can cook the veggies in oil, better. If you can cook the veggies, period, better. Blended stuff, smoothies, probably not the best, but at least you're digesting the vegetable first. And again, because the Vata has a problem with digestion, if you're pre-chewing it in a blender, it might be easier to put down. Some fruits are good. You have to be careful that they're not too airy. Some lentils are really good. Grains, it depends on the grain. You can't get the puffed grains like rye or millet, corn. Those are the ones that are kind of airy to the gut. Grains like quinoa, rice, oat, those are okay because they're heavier. Again, if you can stick to foods that are heavy, they usually will fare better in the long run. Vatas are all over the place, so the concept is if you get foods that ground, if you get friends that ground, If you get activities that ground, you'll balance out the imbalance. Also, you have to try to stay away from environments that are excessively cold and drying. Wind, we talk about in Asian traditions, we always avoid wind. I learned, when I learned about acupuncture, Dr. Joseph Helms was at the front, and he kept on saying with the first lecture I went to, and I was in my 40s, had long hair back then, big warrior type. He kept on saying, I got to get out of this breeze when he was talking to the audience. There's about 600 doctors. And he kept on talking about wind invasion. I'm wondering, what is he talking about? And that's why you'll see, usually in Asian traditions, you have to keep the neck all bundled up because of cold wind invasion. Well, it makes a big difference. So drying, excessive cold, temperatures like we have in Chicago, not the best. So you want to stay bundled up, you want to stay moist, which also brings me to the moisture. A lot of my guys come in super dry, and they're okay with it. It's not okay. You really have to, if the integument or the skin on the outside is good, then the body on the inside is good. So you have to take care of your skin. You have to pamper it. Using Irish Spring and those soaps that are heavily perfumed with alcohol is a no-no. Got to use Dove White non-perfumed. See my video, DrRic Tutorial Winter Itch, and it'll give you some ideas about what to do to protect the skin and the hair. We don't just accept dry skin and lack of hair has genetics. It's probably off balance. So if you start taking care of your skin, not taking so many excessively hot showers, then you might be able to start the balance process here. Scheduling is very important because of this mind thing, being off and indecisive. You have to, usually if you want to balance Vata, a schedule where you're going to sleep the same time every night. I know you might have a lot of chores, you want to TV binge watch because it's your day off. You have to stick with the same schedule of nighttime, bedtime ritual. Check out my video, DrRic question, sleep ritual. You can see what I do. Or reset your clock, my tutorial, reset your clock. That's another idea. I do that mostly because I want to reset my circadian rhythm to help the adrenals stay fit. But a lot of my patients who have insomnia or jet lag, it's important to do that. My guys who travel on airplanes a lot, there's a lot of Vata. It makes it more, when you're up in the air, it makes it more chances that you'll be imbalanced. So sometimes grounding and trying to get a good night's sleep, trying to wake up at the same time every day, trying to keep your exercise in the morning if you can. If you can't and you have to exercise in the evening, especially before dinner or before sleep, you have to finish that exercise with a grounding activity like stretching, breath, yoga, poses, stuff like that. It might not be part of your exercise routine, but try to finish off with that. And even if you have aggressive testosterone that's been turned on with your routine and muscles getting nice and full, if you finish off, it'll help the brain cool down. Even though you might not have a problem with sleeping, it'll help the brain cool down before sleep so that, again, the brain can rest, go into those deep stages of sleep, 6 REM cycles per night, and it'll help the adrenals recharge during that time. Sometimes having a food schedule as well, going back to the food, it's important to have 3 to 4 meals a day and on a regular basis. I always like high protein in the morning, in the afternoon, and then higher carbohydrates, healthy carbs in the evening. If you want to throw a snack in there, that's fine. But if you get home late, it's probably not a good idea to eat a big meal. You're not supposed to eat 2 hours to 3 hours before you sleep, just because of reflux issues, but also because of the digestion problem. The gut is not made to secrete a whole bunch of acid right before you sleep. It's made to start the acid process and then hand off, at least the stomach, hand off to the small intestine so it can take advantage of the absorption overnight. So you guys that work second shift or third shift, it's going to be a tough one, but if you keep the majority of your days scheduled, you should be okay. Solid friends, being surrounded by people that are also reinforcing is important. If you're an anxious person and you hang out with anxious friends, guess what? You're going to have an anxious life. So getting away from bad relationships, being with solid people that will support you, and you'll be attracted to that already. You'll know that when you have an imbalance, you'll want to seek, and when you meet somebody that's balanced, you'll want to say, this is kind of cool to be with this person. So just listen, be mindful of the presence of others around you, and you'll know by natural attraction who you're supposed to be with. That doesn't mean a love interest, that just means to hang out with. That could be a teacher too, or a mentor, or a coach, or a yoga teacher, or high intensity interval training teacher, coach, whoever it is, try to hang out more. And the energy might rub off on you. At least they'll balance you out. Finally, when it comes to this stuff, this imbalance, any of these disease processes or presentations being severe, no question, go for the prescriptions that we offer in Western medicine. And that's when I pull out the prescription pad. Well, actually, nobody writes with a pad anymore. It's all by electronic medical records, but that's when I go for the medicines. But my usual suggestion is, if you have to pay for those expensive medicines, and with Trump Care, even though it's covered now, it's probably going to not be covered in a couple of years. If you have to pay for the expensive medicines and they cool you down, you should still try to balance life out, because my objective is to get you off of medicines if you can. Again, onto the natural stuff, because that's the best way to do it. If you have to be on medicines, fine. Put them to a minimum. Ask your practitioner, how long am I going to be on these things? If there's other ways, if you can't find other ways with your practitioner, just go to an integrative medicine doctor. He might be able to give you other options as well. So hopefully this helps. I know this is a lot of information, but it just is a nice way to go old school to balance out diseases that might be presenting to the majority of people that I see. Thanks for listening, but don't forget, subscribe to me for other weekly words of wisdom.